livestock was kept in better conditions than the children.
Most of our livestock was kept in better conditions than the children. That is the exact language used by the Vinton County Sheriff. He was not exaggerating. He was documenting. Think of a windowsill in a 12 by 12-foot room, painted shut from the inside, not to keep out the cold, but to keep in a secret that had no name, no school records, and no birth announcements. That windowsill held back 4 years of silence while on the other side of the glass, neighbors mowed their lawns and collected their mail. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Files 911, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. On June 30th, deputies from one of Ohio's smallest sheriff's offices, serving a population of fewer than 13,000 people, executed a search warrant at a house on Omar Street in the village of Hamden.
All right, today on June 30th, the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, along with the Ohio Bureau of Investigation, executed and is still continuing to investigate Omar Street in Hamden, Ohio.
The warrant was for an unrelated investigation, one the sheriff still refuses to discuss. But what they found inside that small, unremarkable structure was not a secondary piece of evidence. It was 16 children, ranging in age from 1.5 to 18 years old. They had been concealed inside a single cramped room.
12 by 12 area, it seems like is where they've spent the most of the last 4 years.
Surrounded by what the Attorney General later described as a high presence of bacterial and human feces. The smell, he said, he could not get off his skin.
I didn't actually go into the room where the kids were. I just looked through the door. That was yesterday. I can still smell. I can't get the smell. I cannot get the smell off of me or away from me right now.
The youngest child was barely able to walk. The oldest, an 18-year-old female, could not spell her own name. Developmentally, investigators classified her as a child. She had the vocabulary of a toddler and the distant, vacant stare of someone who had never been taught that the outside world existed. Nobody asked, nobody answered. The house itself gave away nothing. No toys in the yard. No children's bicycles tipped over near the railroad tracks. Neighbors told law enforcement they had no idea any kids lived there.
Kids lived there. We talked to some of the neighbors. We talked to some of the people from the neighborhood. These people have been here for about 4 years, and we've talked to some people who live in the neighborhood who said, I had no idea that.
4 adults lived there, and 16 minors were erased so completely from public view that for 4 years, no one triggered a mandatory reporter call. Not a doctor, not a teacher, not a delivery driver. The Attorney General's own words, there isn't much evidence that kids live there.
Hidden.
I will tell you this, there isn't much evidence
that is not a failure of one system. That is a coordinated blank spot on the map. The children were not homeschooled. They were simply not schooled.
Yes.
Whether it's the public school or the local Christian or charter school or even homeschooled by an appropriate parent or adult who's willing to take on that responsibility. But every adult in that house, once they've allowed children in, has now a legal obligation to...
There are no medical records, no immunization cards, no paper trail at all.
Law enforcement says there are no medical or school records for them, and they're still looking into all of that.
They were undocumented in their own country. The 4 adults arrested at the scene faced 17 felony counts of child endangering each. Second-degree felonies in Ohio punishable by up to 8 to 12 years per count, potentially stacked to run consecutively. Those 4 individuals are identified as Elizabeth Cers, Gary Cers Jr., Gary Cers Sr, and Christina Cers, a blended household of parents and grandparents. The charging documents, filed in Vinton County Court, are sparse. They recite the statutory language, recklessly created a substantial risk to the health or safety of a child, and violated a duty of care. The complaint does not describe the room. It does not mention the insects. It does not note that some of the children were so malnourished they required immediate airlift to a Level I trauma center. That detail came later from the Attorney General's press briefing, where he compared the scene to those old television commercials showing starving children with flies on their faces, staring blankly past the camera.
where they actually discovered the kids and found the kids. And it's not that different than those old commercials you used to see of like kids in Africa, like just where they're covered in bugs and squatting and had that like distant look in their eyes. It was terrible.
He said it was pure evil, and then he corrected himself. It was just a disgusting sense. Here is where the legal translation becomes critical. A second-degree felony child endangerment charge in Ohio requires proof that the defendant created a substantial risk to the child's safety through a course of conduct, not a single momentary lapse. The fact that 17 counts were filed simultaneously indicates that investigators immediately identified a prolonged pattern. 4 years of confinement in conditions that the sheriff summarized with one clinical phrase: most of our livestock was kept in better conditions. The law does not require that the children were beaten. It requires that the conditions themselves made serious physical harm probable. And in that 12 by 12 room, harm was not a probability. It was the floor they stood on. But here is the parallel narrative that turns this from a local tragedy into a legal thriller. The search warrant was not for the children. It was for something else entirely. What if that warrant had been for a nonviolent property crime? Something routine, something that a deputy might have cleared in 30 minutes and forgotten by lunch. What if that door had been opened, glanced into, and simply shut again with a note reading, "Room appears unoccupied"? How many more years would those 16 children have remained invisible, their existence scrubbed from every database, their survival dependent on the same 4 adults who denied them language and daylight? This is the ticking clock moment hidden inside the affidavit. The children were found because someone was looking for something that had nothing to do with them. And if that original lead had never materialized, those 16 lives might have vanished completely, not into the system, but into an unrecorded statistic. Nobody asked, nobody answered. The investigation is now being led by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office in coordination with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the Attorney General's Special Prosecution Section. A standard move when a small rural county, with perhaps 3 felony prosecutors, confronts a case of this magnitude. The forensic analysis alone will take weeks. The 12 by 12 room will be documented by measurements, UV light, and biological sampling. Each child will be interviewed through a forensic child psychologist once they are medically stable. The older children may provide fragmented testimony. The youngest will likely communicate only through behavior. The prosecutors will then face the delicate task of identifying the least culpable adult, the one who can be flipped to testify against the others in exchange for a reduced sentence.
Neglect. And then, once the prosecutors identify the least culpable, the least responsible adult who's charged, they will...
This is not betrayal. It is prosecutorial arithmetic, and it is how multi-defendant neglect cases are built in America. As Attorney General's Office veterans have noted, a Latina phrase applies here: res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself.
The law called res ipsa loquitur, this thing speaks for itself. You don't need a lot of evidence to show that kids in
The publicly available docket shows the 4 defendants are being held on $300,000 bail each.
Now, the 4 Cers family members are being held in jail. A judge set their bail at $300,000 each, and more
Their mugshots reveal eyes that some observers have described as red-rimmed, though no toxicology report has been released. The family had lived in multiple Ohio counties, Gallia, Jackson, and even in Wisconsin before settling in Vinton County. A 2021 Facebook post from the Pike County Sheriff's Office had already named Gary Cers Jr.
Back in 2021, the Pike County Sheriff posted on Facebook about Gary Cers Jr. The sheriff said he was requesting warrants for Cers Jr. for felony theft and receiving stolen property because items stolen from a construction site had been recovered from the home where he lived.
In connection with felony theft and receiving stolen property after construction site items were recovered from his home, that earlier brush with law enforcement did not trigger a welfare check. The children remained unseen. The 18-year-old who cannot spell her own name presents a profound legal question. She is an adult by chronological age, but, according to the charging documents, a victim of child endangerment because of her developmental state. The offenses committed against her likely began when she was a minor, placing those acts squarely within Ohio's statute of limitations. She may also be the key to unraveling the biological relationships inside the house. Elizabeth Cers is only 33 years old, making it improbable that she is the birth mother of all 16 children.
That she used to go to this baby pantry, you know, where if you are a person in need and can't afford stuff, you go there and you can get diapers and formula and stuff like that. And that she would come in and she was kind of like, she would come in once a week. You were allowed to come in once a week, but that she would sometimes try to come more than once a week. And that Gary Jr., this is what the report says, that he would wait out in the car or the truck or whatever, and she'd come in and she seemed kind of anxious and stuff like that.
Some of those kids may have been acquired through informal custody transfers, a phenomenon common in regions ravaged by the opioid epidemic, where parents incapacitated by addiction leave children with relatives or acquaintances who then fail to register them for school or medical care. If that is the case, these children were not just hidden, they were completely erased from the civil record, circulating only within the walls of that house. The hard evidence, when it comes, will likely include photographs that will never be shown in open court without a warning. The sheriff has already stated that the floor was saturated with human waste. The Attorney General has stated that some children were covered in bugs. The medical records will reveal the exact nutritional deficits, the precise bone density delays, the neurological impact of extreme social isolation. And somewhere in the chain of custody is the original search warrant affidavit, the one that lists the crime investigators were actually there to solve. That document, when unsealed, may answer the one question that hovers over the entire case. What were 4 adults so determined to hide that they were willing to keep 16 children in a windowless room for half a decade to keep it buried? Nobody asked. Nobody answered. The Vinton County Sheriff's Office has released a short public statement. It is available online now. Pull it up, rate each line, and in the comments tell us, which single sentence in that official release do you believe will prove most damning when this case finally reaches a jury? If you found this forensic breakdown valuable, share, and subscribe to Crime Files 9/11, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case where the evidence leads and we follow.